Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the May 11th regular meeting. At this time, I would like to call the meeting to order and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm going to call for the adoption of the agenda. They're going to move some stuff around a little bit, so give them a second to do that, and then we'll adopt the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and move the agenda with the following changes in with respect to our friends who are in the audience tonight. I'd like to move the public hearing up to after proclamations, after C and proclamations for C. And I'd like to move final confirmation for our friends in the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and the Tree Board up to immediately after our adoption of the agenda. The third change I would like to make at the out of the request of Councilmember Riddle is to move item 9D down to in advance of 10 under ordinances and resolutions for council discussion, so we can take it off the consent calendar and for purposes of highlighting the importance of this issue. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Agenda's been moved in second with some changes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
You get that, Philippa? Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to proclamations.
Final confirmation.
Oh, final confirmation. Yep. Okay, hold on about a second. Is Corey here? Would you like to come on up for a second, Corey? Thank you.
Not just yet. I'm sorry.
No.
In a minute. Apologies, we changed the agenda.
Yeah, we moved things around a little bit. Okay, thank you.
Hi, so today we have Eric. He is a junior at Shorecrest High School, and I'll let him introduce and give a little background on why he wants to join the park board.
Welcome, Eric.
I just want to join the park board because I thought it was a good opportunity to give my input and opinions on subjects that are around us that could use some work.
Okay,
Thank you.
appreciate that. Council, do we have any questions for Eric tonight? Can you go up higher? Okay. Okay. Eric, you need to repeat yourself. No, I'm just joking. Okay. Council, any questions for Eric this evening? Yes.
Yes, if I may. Eric, welcome. Thank you very much for being willing to volunteer. We have at least 2 Shorecrest grads up here, Mr. Lebo and myself, him earlier than me, but not by much. But thank you so much for being willing to volunteer, and we look forward to you joining the Parks Board.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Friatani.
And Mr. Zhang, thank you very much for volunteering for this position. It's a fun commission to be on, and so enjoy your time on it. But I wanted to find out from you, what's your favorite park?
Animal Acres.
Nice.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Just a comment. I really appreciate you stepping up and joining the Parks and Rec Board. It's important to have a diversity of experiences, and I think your experience will be instrumental for us moving forward with all the cool parks we have in this community. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Philippa.
Yes.
I
Oh,
would just
Councilman-
also like to echo, thank you for volunteering and go Scots.
Councilmember Cassover.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Eric, thank you so much for volunteering for this Parks Board. My question to you is how do you like to use the parks yourself? What activities do you participate in the parks?
I like going down the slides with my friends.
Nice.
Wow, that's awesome.
Wonderful.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Would anybody like to move Eric? Yes.
I would like to move Eric Zhang for his confirmation for the Parks Board.
Second,
Okay, Eric's been moved in second for the Parks Board. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Pass unanimously. Thank you.
Welcome, Eric.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And in the future, everybody knows any young people would like to be involved. We're always looking for that. So please keep in mind. And with that, we're gonna do our tree board person. This is kind of funny. Is he here at this time? Well, okay.
Shovel all over again.
This gentleman, we had to think hard and really hard about putting him on one of our boards, but welcome, Mr. Phillips. Tell us about yourself.
Now, how does this work? Is it on?
Yep. No, it's not
No,
on.
you gotta,
You've only been gone like 2 years.
Touch either one of those buttons?
Yeah. There you
there you
go.
go.
This isn't the one that was here when I was here. Oh,
Tell us about yourself.
well, I will quickly, just real quickly. I've had quite a bit of opportunity to be involved in shaping the policies of the city in terms of our urban forest and tree conservation. From, I think it was 2006 or 7, original urban forest task force that we had that updated the original 1999 tree ordinance. So we did that, worked on that for 1.5 years and made a recommendation to the council. 2 years later, I was a member of another urban forest task force to correct some of the issues with the first one that that showed up in terms of practicality and some other areas with that. But and then certainly as a council member, several times opportunities to work on tree conservation policy, and did serve as the council's liaison with the tree board for a couple of years during that time. So I have had lots of opportunities to work on that, but I believe that the need to continue that work is an ongoing kind of process, and I'm able and willing to do that.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Phillips? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mark, I can't tell you how cool this is, actually. I mean, you coming back and joining the group again after all your service to the community. And I can't think of a more qualified and dedicated volunteer for the community. And so I just want to say my sincerest thanks for you being willing to step back into the fold and help us out where the work, as you know, continues, and you were foundational in it back in the 90s.
Well, you remind me, it was that original work that was done with the Urban Forest Task Force. One of the recommendations that came out of that was the creation of a tree board. And I guess in the back of my mind, I've always felt a certain kind of feeling of wanting to be sure that board was successful and functioned. And I do understand that there have been issues with not having a full regiment of commissioners there, or board members. So that's certainly a factor in my mind too. But thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark.
It's Member Farahani.
Hi, Mr. Phillips, thank you very much for volunteering. And, you've had 17 years worth of experience. Haven't we solved all the problems with trees and canopy in the city yet? I mean, so what do you want to work on while you're on the version of the tree board?
I knew somebody would ask a hard question. Well, it's stuff comes up. Stuff is always coming up. You're working on some things right now that bear upon trees, and I think that's important. And the tree board has had some input into that. The corridor work that you're doing. I guess I've tended to take a kind of a balanced approach. I mean, I feel like we have a pretty good ordinance right now. If you look around at other places, I think we have a fairly effective tree ordinance. And it has flexibility in it it does a good job, and the data that we've done in terms of inventorying our forest certainly shows that it's being effective. But it also has opportunities for homeowners to play an active role in controlling the trees, around their properties. There are amongst us, and sometimes I share this view, fear of these giant things that surround our houses and what can happen in windstorms and at night and that kind of thing. And I understand that and I respect that. And I think our ordinance gives people the opportunity to deal with that if they feel strongly about it. So, but I guess I've kind of looked at it as in a sense, as a test. We are an urban environment, an urban place, but how much of a forest can we have and keep? And I have felt that, and I think as others of us do in the city, that kind of pushing the envelope on that is where we'd like to be in terms of pushing the edge of how great a forest we can have and still recognize that 13,500 people live here in fairly close proximity. So I guess as things, I don't know, Tracy, as things come up, I hope to be a helpful voice in terms of considering them.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, yes. Good.
You're not giving me any good feelings towards retirement if you keep coming back. But I appreciate you coming back to public service. I appreciate your perspective, and I think you'll be a valuable member on the tree board. So thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, I'll echo that it would have been easy for you to stay retired, and I appreciate you coming back. I know we did not overlap directly on the city council, and you were my predecessor as liaison to the tree board. So I'm looking forward to working with you. And we're going to hit the ground running, because at their June 7th meeting, they're doing some pretty meaty considerations about tree replacements in right of ways.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah,
Mayor
thank you for
French.
coming back.
Thanks, Larry.
If there are no further comments or questions, I'd like to go ahead and move Mark Phillips for final confirmation for tree board position 3, term
Second.
expiring
Sorry.
February 28th, 2026.
Second.
Okay, been moved in second.
Comment?
Yes.
And I just want to remind the public that Mark was absolutely instrumental and a partner in getting the plastics ordinance passed in the city of Lake Forest Park, which is very forward thinking. And Mark championed that for many years before I was on the council. And I thank you for that work as well, because Zero Waste Washington classified it as one of the best ordinances in the state at the time. And much of that is due to Mr. Phillips' work.
Well, thank you. I recall that you took the lead on a lot of that work. So
Nice partnership, my friend.
Okay. It's been moving in second to put Mark Phillips on the tree board, position 3. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Ayes. Pass unanimously. Thank you, Mark.
thank you.
And in all honesty, it would take a whole night for him to say all this great things he's done for the city. So we appreciate it, Mark.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, now we'll move on to proclamations. We got 3 of them tonight. I'll let you go first, Tom, if that's okay.
Oh, you want to start with the Safe Boating Week?
Yeah, let's do that.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a proclamation for Safe Boating and Paddling Week, and we have some friends from the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I'll read the proclamation if you'd like to come up and make some comments after the very short proclamation here. Whereas on average, 700 people die each year in boating related accidents in the US, with the vast majority of those accidents caused by human error and poor judgment and not by the boat, equipment, or environmental factors. And whereas a significant number of boaters who lose their lives by drowning each year would be alive today if they had worn their life jackets. And whereas the city of Lake Forest Park is bounded by 2 miles of shoreline in Lake Washington, and whereas a large number of Lake Forest Park's residents of all ages engage in recreational boating, and whereas the mission of the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary Division 2, overseeing the North Shore area, is to promote and improve recreational boating safety by teaching boating safety courses and conducting vessel safety checks. Now, therefore, the mayor and the city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim May 20th to 26th, 2023 as Lake Forest Park Safe Boating and Paddling Week, signed this 11th day of May 2023. Jeff R. Johnson, Mayor. If you'd like to make some,
Come on up.
please.
Thank you so much, Mayor, council members. I'm Deborah Alderman. I'm a member of the local Coast Guard Auxiliary, and I brought with me a colleague, Dale Vodica. And both of us are so grateful for Lake Forest Park's continuing advocacy of boating safety. And we're always looking to collaborate and work more closely with all of the local cities around Lake Washington to keep voters safe. And we just want to congratulate you again. And I know Councilmember French was really instrumental, but I'm sure all of you supported the legislation a couple of years ago. You may be the only community in the entire state, I'm not sure, to make wearing of life jackets mandatory for, I think for just paddlecraft or small boats or
Human powered craft.
human power craft. So that's really making a statement, and I understand it's starting to work. So thank you so much. And I just, if members of the public are listening in, I just want to recommend that you check out how easy it is to wear a life jacket.
I
It's so
know, it's like-
comfortable and stylish. And
I have one under my suit.
and if you
Friday is where your life jacket. to work.
right, exactly. So next Friday, wear your life jacket to work day. And so wherever you work, whether it's the library or a school or a shipyard, you know, if you put on a life jacket, take a picture, put it up online, that'll just show how much you have a commitment to joining us in advocating for vessel safety and paddling safety. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. It's
Thank
gonna
you
be
very much.
It's gonna be interesting. It's National Ride to Work Week too. So wear your life jacket and ride to work might be interesting. There you go.
Okay,
Thank
Thank you.
thank you very much. Okay, our next proclamation will be for, I'm gonna do this one, I got it. Okay. For the Peace Officer Memorial Day. Whereas in 1962, the Congress and the President of the United States signed a proclamation which designated May 15th as Peace Officer Memorial Day, and the week in which the date falls as Police Week. And whereas members of law enforcement recognize their duty to serve the citizens of the city of Lake Forest Park by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocents against deception and weak against oppression or intimidation. And whereas during Law Enforcement Week and throughout the year, the Lake Forest Park City Council recognizes and appreciates the critical contributions and sacrifices made by members of law enforcement at all levels and honors their courage and dedication. And whereas the dedicated men and women of the Lake Forest Park Police Department provide this vital public service day in and night, enforcing law, guarding the lives and the property rights, freedom of every community member. Now I, therefore, the mayor and the city council of the city of Lake Forest Park, do hereby proclaim the city's recognition and appreciation of our law enforcement officers, past and present, by designating the week of May 14th through 2023 as National Police Week, in recognition of the service given by these men and women who stand guard to preserve the rights and the security of all citizens. Further, the city council calls upon the citizens of Lake Forest Park to observe May 15, 2023 as Peace Officer Memorial Day in honor of those fallen law enforcement officers and those who became disabled in the performance of their duty, and recognize and offer our respect to the survivors of our fallen heroes. In witness thereof, signed this 11th day of May 2023, Mayor Jeff Johnson. And with that, I will say I'm very proud. And before I have everybody clap for him, we were rated the second most safest city in the state of Washington. In 1 and 1-4, we're fantastic. And I would like a big hand for the person who's ran it all, Chief Harden. Anytime you get a chance to talk with our officers, they do a great job, and it's not the easiest job in the world, but we're very fortunate to have our police department in Lake Forest Park. Thanks, Chief. And with that, we'll go on to proclamation for National Public Works Week. Whereas public work service provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives. And whereas the support of an understanding, informed citizenry is vital to efficient operation of public work systems and programs such as emergency management response, water, sanitary, sewer, street, public buildings, parks, surface water management, and solid waste collection. And whereas the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depends on these facilities and services. And whereas the quality and the effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is vitally dependent upon efforts and skill of public works officials. And whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now, therefore, the mayor and the city of Lake Forest Park do by here proclaim the week of May 21st through 27th, 2023 as National Public Works Week in the city of Lake Forest Park. And I call upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contributions that public works officially make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality in life. In witness whereas signed this 11th day of May 2023, Mayor Jeff Johnson. Thank you. And with that one, I'm going to introduce and call out somebody who probably doesn't get called out, but there is a gentleman in this room that we really, really owe a lot to. He's right up there with the chief. And Scott Walker, will you please stand up for a second? Scott. Scott's been with us a long, long time. And, you know, every time it snows, Scott's up at 3 a.m. working on filling up the sand trucks. He's everywhere. And we're very fortunate to have him and all the public works people. I just read 2 proclamations on pretty much the 2 most important things that city has to do, and that's take care of you. You need to be safe and you need to wake up and drive down your roads. And I like that, sounds bad, but when you wake up, you want your toilets to flush. And Public Works has done a great job for us. So we're very, very fortunate. How about another hand for the 2 of them? Do I can make a speech, Scott? I'm just joking. All righty, with there, we're going to go on to the public hearing, correct? Okay. Okay. At this time, I'll invite Steve Bennett up to the podium. This is a public hearing on ordinance 23-1263, creating chapter 12.50 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code retraining walls. First, Mr. Bennett, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. This ordinance is intended to address the retaining walls, establish criteria and method of construction for the and appearance for retaining walls that are built adjacent to or in the public right of way that support and protect public transportation infrastructure. So the ordinance is fairly straightforward. I won't go into a great deal of detail about it because I know there's a lot of folks here that like to talk, but generally it's establishing requirements for structural review, providing for protection against graffiti, and in combination with a set of design guidelines, it's creating some provisions that would allow the city to have more control over the appearance of the walls and also vegetation associated with the wall design. And so the design guidelines provide examples of what type of structure or architectural finish the city is looking for in terms of the way that that they appear. And so there's a couple of pictures of flora and fauna of that can be associated with the Northwest, and that's clearly delineated as a preference that the artistic design have a strong relationship to the Northwest. The design guidelines go on to provide examples of landscaping that should also be integrated into the design of the wall construction. And then it offers an alternative to the parts 1 and 2 to just doing a green wall where the wall is built such that the plantings can be integrated from top to bottom. And so the also included in the council's packet was some comments from Sound Transit about this current draft. And so council's had a chance to look at that, and in addition to some written comments that received. And so that would conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions council has at this point, or we could move on to public comments.
Council, do we have any questions at this time? Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. Steve, Director Bennett, what is the sort of the permitting process for retaining walls, especially if they're not part of a larger project? Can someone just do retaining walls and how would that process flow?
You mean prior to adoption of something like this, or?
Or if we were to adopt this?
If we were to adopt this, the process would be, this review would be undertaken as part of a right-of-way permit approval process. So that's why these regulations are proposed to be included in I believe it's the Title 12 that deals with streets and roads, and the Public Works Director is the ultimate authority on approval of right-of-way permits. So that's why it also talks about the Public Works Director, reviewing as related to these new criteria. And so that is an administrative ministerial permit that is appealable, but the initial decision is an administrative one by the Public Works Director, the way the code's currently set up.
And as a follow-up, I know that we've noted in here that walls that are located on private property that support the public transportation process, I'm assuming that'd be like in an easement on a private property, that would flow through the same right-of-way permit process. Is that correct? Or is
Right.
that a gray area?
The permit application of the Public Works Director is looking at is really specifically about what's being built in the right of way. But I'm sure that whatever agency is proposing walls or other improvements, would be, include that in their plans in terms of how they're going to handle, aspects of construction on private property in a temporary construction easement or in a permanent easement where they'd have like a security fence or something. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Deputy Mayor French.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Director Bennett. This is more a procedural question. I think that we've heard kind of loud and clear from the public that they're looking for more input on the process and the design guidelines, particularly about sound attenuation. How would the timeline, so to speak, such as it is, I don't think there's a prescribed timeline, be impacted by the creation of a citizens task force to approach the various considerations that the public is concerned about?
Well, just to clarify, are you saying that there should be, are you talking about proposing a citizen task force, look at the regulations, or be part of review of a permit after the regulations are adopted?
Looking at the regulations specifically prior to any application.
It's that's a difficult question to answer because there's the appointing of a citizen task force and then giving, I assume that the council would give them a time frame. So it'd be up to the council whether you want to have them review it over 2 or 3 meetings and how fast that's going to occur and make a recommendation back to council. So I think that really is the timeline is something that the council probably, would need to be specific about in order to, make sure that they're getting a recommendation, in a time frame that they feel is appropriate.
Thank you. I know that's a difficult question. I appreciate it, Steve.
Yes, Councilmember Freitani.
And thank you, Director Bennett, for your report. And I want to take this time to acknowledge the letters that we've been getting from the public. There have been at least 9 in the past week, and some of them have been concerned about the concentration of the power in the Director of Public Works to make the final approval decision. Is this standard, or is there going to be some possibility of having a design review board or that kind of thing? Working with Deputy Mayor French's comment about having the Citizen Commission on this kind of thing. Again, don't want to slow this on too much, but basically, is there going to be enough public input with a lot of these design reviews?
Well, we started talking about these regulations in January, and the first draft of it, just set this up because it was part of the roads and streets section as being a decision that the Public Works Director would make administratively, as opposed to if it was in the zoning regulations, it would probably be me making the final decision if it didn't go to the hearing examiner or to the some other design review body. So that's just, that was a starting place, and the council certainly can amend this to create some greater level of public involvement, just like we have with other types of applications, like a major tree permit or a major critical area permit. Residents within 300 feet are notified at the time of application. And so they're aware, they can come look at the application, and then could potentially appeal it once the decision is made. So there's that level. Then there's a level of a citizens advisory or committee. So if you wanted to include that in the process, like we have in the town center design guidelines, we have a design review board that would be seated to review various aspects of a town center proposal. So it's really once again something that the council can certainly add to this process.
Yeah, it was a tough question. I appreciate your answer.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. See no more questions. We'll open the citizens' comments. We'll have a list back there. Remember 3 minutes. I appreciate that. All we need is your name. We don't need an address or anything like that.
I'm just gonna let the audience know that there's a little button right here that moves this up and down. So if you need height reasons, just push this up and down. And then if you talk directly in the mic, the closer you get, the louder it is. Okay? But red light means it's good.
Thank you. Okay. All righty. Wish to speak. Okay, Al Horn. Welcome.
Thank you. I assume that list is long, so I'll make this quick. I've lived here since 1976. This is a beautiful city. I love it. I can't think of anything that's going to be uglier than a 14 or 16-foot wall that's going to run 400 yards through the middle of this city. So I would ask this council to slow this process down as much as you can. This thing is going to have graffiti on it, but by the time the concrete cures. But we have Washington State Department of Transportation that will take care of that, just like they do in the tunnel that gets onto I-5 off of Lake City Way. So if you think it's bad now, drive through that just one time. The noise that this is going to reverberate to everybody on the east side of Bothell Way is going to be astounding. The people that live in the condos and the houses in Sheridan Beach and the apartments are going to be impacted forever. But the engineers that design this will be long gone. So please slow this down. You represent the citizens of Lake Forest Park, not Sound Transit, not the Department of Public Works. You represent us. So do your duty to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I know everybody wants to clap every time, but I'd rather we can wait a little bit that would just be fair to everybody so they get time to talk. Well, we have Roz Bird.
My name is Roz Bird. So, Mayor and council members, I've been attending city council meetings for at least 35 years. Although the people sitting in your seats may change, like me, they are all residents of Lake Forest Park. And like me, they have all cared about the city in terms of aesthetics, the environment, services, and creating a welcoming atmosphere. What I don't understand is why this council seems to no longer care. This hearing is about a policy regarding potential retaining walls, particularly along Bothell Way due to ST3 development. Instead of listening to knowledgeable citizens, the new policy gives sole decision-making powers about walls, landscaping, tree care to a staff member with no public input. Disgraceful and short-sighted. I also don't understand why this project that necessitates an enormous wall has not been fought, lobbied against with full force by the council. We voted for new light rail. We did not vote to have our forested city and welcoming residential neighborhoods slashed through by a mega highway with gigantic bus shelters and far too much tree removal. Lake Forest Park is a unique small city, clearly unappreciated by the corporate folks at Sound Transit. It is your job, along with other citizens, to convince them to tone down this project, to right size it for our size and needs. This will save time, save money, and save Lake Forest Park. Please listen to your fellow citizens and act with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Tom Bird, please.
My name's Tom Bird. I'm actually related to the previous speaker. I want to say that if we have this huge retaining wall on Bothell Way, which it sounds like we probably will, I think the aesthetics of it is really, really important. It's something that the citizens of this community and everyone traveling that highway is going to have to look at for 50 years, maybe even more. So the aesthetics is extremely important, and what that wall looks like, the decision for its visibility and its potential attractiveness, if that's possible, should not be left up to a single person or left up to a group of engineers. I strongly believe there should be citizens' input into the aesthetics of that wall, and it should be meaningful input. It should be a citizens committee or task force or whatever you want to call it that includes an artist and includes thoughtful thinking about the aesthetics of the wall, and that the decision of that committee has some influence on the final decision, not just advisory, but actually has influence on the decision. I think that if there's no influence on the decision, it'll just be taken in as advice and paid no attention to. That kind of committee has to be obligated with some influence on the decision making, and it should be a committee that includes artists, not just engineers. And I also believe there's a real concern about noise abatement. I know that the ST3 people have said noise will not be a problem. That just doesn't make sense to me. And I think that needs to be looked at very carefully. It's possible that Lake Forest Park should do its own noise analysis. I think the one done by ST3 a couple of years ago was flawed. And I think that's going to be a major factor that also needs to be paid attention to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Ann Payne.
Hi, I'm Ann Payne, and I agree with the speakers before me. I have the same feelings about the wall and taking down our trees. What does concern me is apparently some of these surveys were done even before the pandemic. And so maybe the need for all this transit isn't the same as they thought it once was. Today, I was reading that they're cutting the 320 bus, which is the one that goes from here to one of the light rail stations to South Lake Union, because it doesn't have the ridership. Now, that's a metro bus, not Sound Transit. But do we really need all this extra transit and all the attendant problems that goes with it? So I'm very, very much against the wall and cutting down our trees, but I just also look at the need for what we're doing here.
Thank you, Ann. Yeah, I got a bunch of no's. Jeff Snedden.
Aloha. My name's Jeff Snedden, and I came here today to try to put some context around this project, why we need a wall, or we're going to build, Sound Transit's going to build a wall. They're going to put in an eastbound dedicated bus lane. And in my opinion, and the opinion of a number of other people, I'm a co-founder of CORE, who you probably heard about. But I'm trying to put some context around this being inequitable, especially for the city of Lake Forest Park. And I wanted to put some context around that. And I'm going to quote some figures. And these figures are not my figures. I found these figures after scouring the Sound Transit site, so I'm not making them up. But just to give you a sense of the inequity that we're facing here in Lake Forest Park, 54% of the impacted homeowners and businesses who have to give up some or all of their property are located here in our city. 67% of the cost of property acquisition and permitting costs are going to be spent on Lake Forest Park. 50% of the cost of construction and construction management will be spent on Lake Forest Park. Roughly 70% of the trees that have to be removed, cut down, will be cut down here in Lake Forest Park. And in the end, the cost per mile of this roadway here is 2.8 times the cost of a mile of roadway anywhere else in the S3 area. But what really puts this in context for me is 95,000 tons. And Sound Transit has to haul in or out 95,000 tons of dirt and debris. That is a huge amount of dirt and debris. In fact, it's 68% of all the dirt and debris that has to be hauled in and out of this entire project end to end. But think about 95,000 tons. The maximum capacity of an industrial dump truck is 20 tons. That means at least 4,500 dump trucks have to run back and forth to start and complete this construction. 4,500 trucks. By the way, 95,000 tons is the equivalent of 10 Space Needles, just to give you a little more context. The Washington Monument in DC, 555 feet tall, weighs 95,000 tons. A Nimitz class aircraft carrier, largest in the world, with a full complement of planes and fuel and bombs and food, weighs 100,000 tons. This is a massive amount of earth moving that has to happen, and it's why we're going to end up with a wall and why we're going to end up with a dedicated eastbound bus lane. And what do we get out of it? We get the transit rider during the weekday, Monday through Friday, saves 3 minutes, 2.3 minutes on this route going eastbound in the afternoon during the weekday rush hour. It just does not add up to me. And I think there are other ways that this can be addressed, like on 145th Street, where 62% of the time savings is taking place without any dedicated bus lanes whatsoever. So I think there are better ways to do this. I don't know how to get it done. Sound Transit's not listening. Maybe you can help. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexia Bailey.
Hi, I won't take up a lot of time. 100% what he said, 100%. And I pretty much agree with what everybody said, actually. I happen to live on Bothell Way at 155th. And so I care obviously about the trees. I care about what does the wall look like. I care an awful lot about noise abatement. It's already loud enough that I can't open my windows, and that's okay. That I bought it knowing that I wouldn't be able to open my windows. But there's not a lot of room for it to get worse. So please, I don't want to go deaf. Thank you.
Thank you. John Drew. John Drew.
Like others who have commented here, I feel the negative environmental and aesthetic consequences of the planned Sound Transit retaining wall will permanently change the natural character of Lake Forest Park. The wall would be less monstrous if bus queue jumps were pursued, but perhaps we'll never get an answer about why this seemingly cheaper and faster alternative was not evaluated. Though I strongly support the efforts to implement a retaining ordinance, and I applaud you for including noise in the draft ordinance, two issues prevent me from supporting the passage in its current form. Both the National Institutes of Health and the World Health Organization cite numerous serious health impacts from environmental noise. Though Sound Transit's SEPA noise study concluded that no significant additional noise will be generated, it did not adequately model the reflective impact of a tall retaining wall the length of 11 football fields. The new ordinance requires that, quote, the retaining wall design satisfies WSDOT current criteria for noise attenuation, unquote. But I fear that Sound Transit will not have to revisit the original noise analysis since their SEPA report appears to be more recent than the current WSDOT requirements. Consequently, I strongly support either rewording to require a new sound study or create a separate ordinance on sound attenuation. Also, since the best mitigation for traffic noise is to reduce source levels, I support the city's advocacy for a lowered speed limit on Bothell Way. And I also support the possible use of quiet pavement for resurfacing. It's a technology that has seen major improvements in the last 15 years. My other concern is with section 1 of the design guidelines, with the use of, quote, shall depict artistic images, unquote. It appears to require that walls with images like the trees or wildlife in the example figures A and B be used. These will not adequately attenuate sound, nor will they discourage frequent graffiti. Further, concrete walls stamped with images of trees will be a cruel and permanent reminder of the substantial loss of tree canopy. I strongly recommend replacing these example images with those used in Bothell and in Perrineville region of Edmonds. These Shot Creek surfaces look more like natural rock than concrete and would better discourage sound reflection and graffiti. Given the comments from Sound Transit, I would not rely on vegetation to soften the appearance and attenuate sound. I have submitted these comments in writing and I provided reference links with those written comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vicky Scurry.
Hi there again. I'm Vicky Scurry, and I sent you a letter today, and it's probably best read silently by yourselves, but I am going to give you the highlights. I've been in transportation planning and basically advocating for communities for over 38 years as a public artist, doing roadway projects that feature amenities like landscape, wall patterning, sound walls, etc. And when I read the ordinance in February, I was trying to be really helpful because I do this all the time. I work with cities, I work with engineers, I help cross-pollinate interdisciplinary teams. But the sound ordinance, or the wall ordinance that you have written, it only was written from a singular point of view, even though it had nice words in it like, well, let's have the walls look like nature and, you know, strengthen our connection to nature. That means absolutely nothing. Let me tell you that, especially when the whole review process for both the position of the wall, the surface of the wall, the aesthetics of the wall, the landscape of the wall, all is run through Public Works. That just doesn't work. And I, at that point, pointed it out and said you really needed to cross-pollinate with other disciplines somehow through either the city council, through the community, because we have a lot of professionals in this community in landscape architecture, public art, urban design, and, you know, land use planning. And the committee that really helps draft this ordinance needs to be made of those type of people, not from a singular point of view. When I look at what happened with ST3 here, what happened there is the same thing. The whole roadway alignment is from one point of view, roadway building, from an engineering perspective. It never could have gotten through had it been an interdisciplinary team that looked at it and reviewed it. The west shift occurred during COVID and nobody knew about it. The city worked exclusively, from what I've read in emails, with the east side neighborhoods trying to get their driveways right. No one ever questioned what was really going to happen on the west side of the road with this big wall. Maybe you didn't see it because you're not really professionals in this field to look at the whole big picture. But the big picture is when it went west, it also changed everything. So to have 4,000 linear feet of wall changes the character of this neighborhood more than you can imagine. It will make us look like the poor sister to both Bothell and Kenmore. It'll attract graffiti. It'll attract vagrancy. It's not friendly. It's going to be a very aggressive road with a sidewalk that has a mow strip that's untended. The landscape is possibly going to get 3 years of temporary irrigation, but no permanent irrigation. And as I mentioned in February, if you look at the work that's been done in Bothell and Kenmore, it has permanent irrigation for the most part, where it looks good, and it looks dead where it doesn't. With the way our climate has changed, without irrigating, it will not survive. So I highly recommend that you get an interdisciplinary team comprised of professionals in the community and to work with the public works people. Thank you very much.
Paula Good.
Hello, owner of the Sheridan Market. I'm often outside Sheridan Market. We have tables out front. The decibel level is 85. 85 is loud. Okay, that is the highest level that it can be. It goes above that, it's damaging to your hearing. So walking down the roadway with several people on multiple occasions, I have my sound meter out, and it often goes from 85 to 90 the way it is right now. So imagine when there's going to be buses and a wall, it's going to be even louder than that. So while I appreciate that the council has this ordinance in front of it for a vote, I think that it should be re-looked at and retooled so that there's some teeth in it, there's some enforcement in it, because right now there is no enforcement in it. It's a bunch of pretty words, but there's no teeth in it to make anybody do anything. You need to address the sound, because if people start losing their hearing, or if there's a lot of, it's not going to be good. And if you don't do the things that are, you need to be responsible in your roles as a city council for the public. I mean, why are you here if you're not listening to the public? It is not Lake Forest Park City Council. It is Lake Forest Park, and we're all part of the city. So I ask you to please vote no on this ordinance. Think about it again and put the tools that everybody has brought into place, and then come back and do it the right way. Get input from other people. This is the only city that hasn't had other teams of people working on a wall ordinance. This is the only city. Every other city that's had walls has had a team involved, and I don't know why the city doesn't do that. So would you please consider it? Appreciate it. Thank you.
I think I'm reading this right, Dick Harris? Yes.
My name is Dick Harris. I live on 158th Lane, fronting Bothell Way. Have for 22 years. Thank you for your service, by the way. I appreciate it. This must be a thankless job up here. I was thinking, I got my hearing aids cleaned this morning. And oh, guess what? I left them home, so I couldn't hear the first part of this or anything. I was hoping that I wouldn't hear my name called, but I did. So anyway, I raised a family on Ballinger Way, right where the Public Works Department is. I was the house in that 3-house cul-de-sac there for 22 years, raised my family. They went to the schools in Lake Forest Park. If any of you are young enough and were in grade school, you probably saw me and Detective Hooper in the DARE program because I gave them a black Camaro for their DARE program so the kids would pay attention. And I would meet with him in the schools and what have you. That's when Perkins was chief. So the reason I'm talking about this is I haven't been to a city council meeting since before when they were deciding whether to build this building. And I had been to early in my time here, I was at one when they were trying to decide whether to buy the Werdeman property across the street. and they didn't have enough money. They couldn't afford it. And I supported them doing that. It was only $1 million or something. It wasn't hardly anything. They didn't. Then they ended up buying a school up on the hill. I came to a meeting again when they were in the process of selling it, and they were trying to decide on this. And of course, I congratulated them on making money on the school, but it was all a waste. So I kind of got discouraged. So I've stayed away from coming to these meetings because it seems like nothing ever, at least my suggestions weren't taken. And there was some pretty huge mistakes, as anybody that knows that history realizes. I had a business in Lake City for 22 years, and I witnessed prostitution, crime, graffiti. I helped form a Lake City task force. We chased all that back to in the 90s and early 2000s, back to Aurora and Ballard. They complained about it. Yeah, you're doing a good job there, but now we have it back. So I believe in the plumber's theory. The sewage runs downhill. And drive in Lake City, you're gonna find graffiti starting at the tunnel all the way. If you look around here real close, you'll find graffiti around here. You're just not looking close enough. It's on the dumpsters, it's on the cans that cover electric stuff, it's on pipes, poles, and walls that are high enough to where you kind of might not notice them. And it grows on itself. We have 4 homes in fronting Bothell Way where I am. And we have it's a beautiful concrete fence. And it's been tagged, so I'm I'm familiar with graffiti personally too. But I got it down right away, hired somebody to get it down, haven't had it since, which is good. But if you look close, I want the city council and the police department to look close, because you're not seeing the graffiti that is here already. In Kenmore, some beautiful walls, they've got graffiti starting there. It's on the dumpsters, it's here and there. And if you don't get it down, it's going to get worse. I'll guarantee you, you've seen Lake City grow with all the apartments and all the housing and stuff. Well, that's our corridor on the east side. It's going to be that way. It's going to be more expensive, so that's the reality of it. So I understand all this improvement and what have you, but please, this time, don't let us down. Slow this process down and make sure that you're doing your job. We trust you to do your job, that you got voted in here to do that. We need you to do that. Now on walls and these beautiful walls, everybody has these great ideas. Am I too loud?
I'll give you 30 more seconds.
Pardon?
I'll give you 30 more seconds.
Okay. In Tacoma, my daughter lives in Tacoma, owns a restaurant downtown Tacoma. They did these beautiful walls with all the artwork and all that past the Tacoma Dome on I-5, the big, huge walls. Beautiful artwork, just beautiful. I thought, oh, wow, that's cool. Won't be any graffiti. Wrong. Now, last year or so, there's graffiti there too. Doesn't matter how beautiful you make it. It will go there as dynamics change. So anyway, sorry for taking all the time.
No problem.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
help. Keep up the good work. Do better.
Thank you. All righty. We will move on, I think. I'm not done.
Our first name is supposed to be right
Okay, Robert Bernstein, sorry about that. That's what I'm dealing with. I'm sorry I missed that, so.
Well, thanks for this time. I am reading the thoughts of Tyson Greer, who was unable to attend tonight. So these are Tyson's comments, although I heartily agree with them. Her recommendation is that it's premature to pass the ordinance or guidelines as is. I appreciate the importance of speed in getting a retaining wall ordinance on the books, considering the looming prospect of a monstrous wall to welcome people into the city of Lake Forest Park through our southern gateway. We can only hope the old adage about the importance of first impressions dies a natural death. In general, the draft ordinance and design guidelines create a context rich in engineering, but weak on community consequences and, as they say, susceptible to the devil dwelling in the details, such as definitions: what is a retaining wall? What is regular maintenance? Unlike other city ordinances intended to protect our environment and the character of the city, there are no provisions to deal with failed plantings, such as requiring replacement plantings as in the tree code, or at least monetary compensation. Changing the monitoring time frame from the earlier 5 years to 3 years only benefits the wall project applicant, not the city. Further, it is disappointing that the topic of noise was removed to be dealt with separately, as it is a concern with large-scale projects, and perhaps a simple design change, such as tilting the top of the wall back to bounce sound skyward instead of across Bothell Way neighbors, could make a difference to city residents. I wish to echo and endorse the comments submitted to Mayor and City Council by Lori Spivak, dated May 8th, 2023. It is this type of expertise that is needed to craft policy, ordinances, and guidelines that maintain the character and quality of life of our city. Following are specific concerns and recommendations to make the ordinance more relevant to Lake Park community and the design guidelines more clear. In the ordinance, the decision process is streamlined. Approval or denial by one person, Director of Public Works, with input the director may take from the applicant and engineers. But it is too streamlined. The ordinance does not even require adherence to the guidelines. Recommendations should be, at a minimum, other professionals besides engineers, for instance, landscape, graffiti, noise experts, need to have input. Ideally, review shall be required by a design review committee of relevant non-engineering professionals, citizens with expertise, and neighbors. Further, as with all environmental permits, there must be an appeal process for the public as long as we are allegiant to democracy. Landscape treatments consistent with this section, that's a quote from the current proposal. And Tyson says she can't understand that language. Design guidelines, she applauds the intent. Yes, if shall and should are not clear, this would clarify the meaning. This is in intent. She wants to recommend adding language that would permit a wall design that looks like a natural rock wall. Natural environment, including native trees, escarpments, fauna, and flora of the region. In guideline 2, she says, I agree with SB 2 to remove the requirement for native vines. However, it should be revised to indicate a preference for native plants, but the priority is drought tolerant. I question whether the city has sought input from independent landscape professionals, or the quote should reach coverage of 30% of the wall front surface within 36 months, unquote. Simply changing shall to should will please the applicant, but does not benefit our city. There is no provision in these guidelines for what course of action the city will, can, or should take if the landscaping fails to thrive. Should this be addressed in the wall ordinance? It could be addressed in the same way we address tree replacement. If a replacement tree dies in X years, the applicant is required to replace it. Third, regular maintenance. There is no definition of what considers regular. Is it weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly? Without defining regular, how can a planning director make his or her decision on the type and conditions for planting living plants that would mitigate the visual, sensory, and auditory impact of removing 1,000 trees? And that's nearly 400 significant trees. Thank you for your thoughtful considerations of these ideas and recommendations. And I'd like to make a further point, personal point. I've heard concern about the speed. The process will take too long if we have citizen groups. What are their roles? How powerful should they be? Got to get it going, got to get it fast. Well, heck, going fast with a bad design is crazy.
Thank you. Nancy Salton. That's the last one.
Hi, I love my community. I only moved here in October 2019. And then the pandemic kind of put a pause button on me getting to know everybody. But today I got to meet my friend for coffee at Sheridan Market. And what probably would have been a 30-minute conversation lasted about 90 minutes because we had to keep pausing for the noise while we sat on the patio to enjoy the sun outside. I heard loud and clear about us being the second safest city in Washington, yet when I found out about the plans on the road behind where my driveway is, I come in and out onto Bothell Way every day, multiple times a day. I asked point blank, what are the plans for environmental design to reduce crime? Blink, 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 blink. Didn't even understand what that meant. What are the studies on the noise? How is that going to impact things? And I, again, met with crickets and tumbleweeds. That really concerns me as somebody whose driveway and house is right there on the road and is affected. I could enjoy the silence during the pandemic. I could see the huge difference. Without any planning for sound mitigation, I'm going to be standing and looking at a 17-foot concrete wall. There's going to be one on my side of the road that ends at my property. And then I have 65 years worth of growth that is 10 feet deep, 5 feet high of dirt, and then 20 feet high of trees that is going to be completely taken away. And that will just ping pong the noise from both sides right into my home, my time capsule of a gem of a 1954 mid-century modern home that is never been touched. And it's something that I wanted to really preserve. And it would be impossible to, because I wouldn't be able to hear my family within my own home because of the noise. It's been really frustrating and upsetting for a person who's grown up with her father working for the Texas Turnpike Authority, having seen him go through the process of land, forgive me, I forgot the word, taking land for roads, seeing how they more thoughtfully engaged and included the community than I'm getting the experience of with Sound Transit. I haven't heard a single plan. You guys saw us a few months ago when we had a Sound Transit board meeting, and there were my neighbors who were coming up and saying, I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen any of these plans. And yet still unanimously, the Sound Transit board voted to proceed and go ahead. I'm looking at you guys and begging you, please be our voice and stand up for us, because Sound Transit's board did not, and it hurt. And I'd love to preserve Lake Forest Park and keep us also a safe city. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anybody else out there like to say something? Okay, then we'll move on to who's on the internet.
If you want to address the council, please use the raise hand function.
So far.
Nope. Okay, since nobody else online would like to speak, at this time, we'll close the public hearing. At this time, we're going to take a break. So if you guys would like to move on, there's no decision being made tonight, so you don't have to worry about that. I think you gave us plenty of information to think about for quite a long time. I appreciate that you all showing up, and so if you'd like to move on, that's fine. We're going to take a break. Give us about 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Regional Crisis Response Agency.
So we have this. We do have to look at this. We do have to do B.
Well, I was told we're not doing anything.
So I'm just going to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good. Let's just do the rest of this question.
Okay, you guys ready?
So we're good.
Welcome back. Real quickly, we'll carry on. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to table ordinance 23-1263, creating chapter 1250 of Lake Forest Park Municipal Code, retaining walls.
Second.
No, we're just. Yeah. Okay. It's been moved to table. Would that be a good word?
Is that the correct term?
Table.
Yeah, table means we're moving it down the line. Yeah.
Table,
Formally.
we're moving to move ordinance number 23. Tom moved it. Anybody like to second it?
Second.
Been moved in second. Any other discussion on that? Well, seeing, yes, sir.
Sort of just a process question that we've gotten a lot of feedback from the community and I'm sure we have our own thoughts on how to proceed. So what is, if we're tabling this to a future meeting, what is the best way for council members to provide feedback based on the public feedback about how we want to move forward with the retaining wall ordinance?
Yes.
I would offer a suggestion of giving, I've taken a lot of notes during the meeting tonight, and there were a lot of common themes. And so I would suggest that, staff and myself, we look at those themes, we compare them to the parameters around council's authority for this kind of wall in WashDOT's, within WashDOT's parameters. And we make some, amendments to this draft and we bring them to council, maybe at a workshop and another open session as soon as we can. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, on point, thank you very much, Ms. Pratt. I appreciate that. I think that's a sound approach unless anybody has a better consideration.
It's just a comment. I don't know our schedule, but I would consider if we need to do a special meeting for this, I would be open to that.
Thank you, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
And on point, we actually, Juneteenth, we do not have a committee of the whole available for June. So with the council's indulgence, I will reach out for scheduling purposes to see what your schedule looks like in terms of scheduling an additional meeting. And it is my suggestion, and I hope that everybody else, I suspect everybody else concurs on this, that we would table the other things we have on since this is more of an urgent matter and move forward with this post haste so the public has a chance to weigh in on it again.
Yeah, I'd be interested either in the available Thursday night or a Monday night, and kind of our standard nights would be
Thursday, Monday.
preferable for me.
Is that Thursday, Monday best for everyone? Okay, thank you all. I'll get back to you shortly then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
And
Yes. Councilmember Castle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And if I just may add my own comment here, I do think it's important for our staff and our city attorney to also understand a little bit about where the council, what the council is thinking at this point. And I very much appreciate Councilmember Goldman's request on this, because while I do agree that it's important for us to understand what the limits are that are placed on council by the state legislation around Washington State Department of Transportation's authority here. I also think it's important for staff and our city attorney to know what the will of council is. So I just want to make that point, and I'm not sure when is the right time to do that, whether it makes some sense for us to have a bit of a discussion tonight, or whether you think that should get put off as well.
I think she was asking Kim, I believe.
I will take it at any time you'd like to, give it to me tonight. I'm happy to take notes, emails, another meeting, whatever you'd like to do.
yeah. On point, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Philippa, I would suggest that there's a lot to digest tonight and not to kick the can down the road, but I think it's important for the staff to take a first swing at it, and then we can come back with some additional input in a very short period of time within the next, I would hope, the next 10 days, 2 weeks, and be able to move forward.
Councilmember Freitine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Cassover, for a concern that I had, which was I appreciate Attorney Pratt taking extensive notes. But you're right, it could be that while we're concentrating on the technical aspects of the ordinance, there might be some will stuff that isn't included. And my particular concern is I am intrigued by this notion of the having a citizens board working on this ordinance. And so, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be part of your remit when you work with the staff on redrafting the ordinance, but so the will of the council idea that Councilmember Cassover posited, I think we need that little piece in there.
Okay, may I ask one?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. Just a question, maybe to ask Mr. Hill about timing on this. We're not, this is an ordinance that is important to the entire community, as opposed to, it's not specific to any a specific set of actions. Are we, I do not believe we are under any set of time constraints in terms of, as long as we are moving forward with reasonable expediency. Is that a, I'm choosing my words carefully.
The discussion is just getting it adopted before any permits would be submitted by any developer, that wouldn't be required to follow this. So I think taking your earliest meetings to discuss this, whether that is pushing aside the governance manual at your upcoming COW and having some, that might be a good forum to give us additional feedback, kind of the will of the council. We've got the 25th meeting, that's our next council meeting. Maybe we have a work session ahead of that meeting as well, to kind of go over what we can collate over the next couple of weeks. I would go for the faster track to have that discussion, not fast tracking the ordinance,
Right,
but have
of
a
course.
faster track to let's all get on the same page and decide what next steps would be, and whether that's a citizens commission weighing in on the crafting of the ordinance, whatever that is, make those decisions quickly, so we can move on that portion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. It reminds me of the sequel to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Councilmember Goldman.
Just thinking about scheduling. So next Thursday, we have a Budget and Finance Committee meeting. In the interest of making sure we have a chance to discuss this, would there be interest in maybe replacing the Budget and Finance Committee with a special meeting on the topic of the retaining walls?
I'm sure my finance director would have no problem with that, actually. Just be honest. Yes.
I was just, we have missed a few. And I think we need to have that, whether it can be in some abbreviated form or not, I think is something we could look at. If we wanted to abbreviate it to an hour and then have a meeting afterwards. That might be, I would be more inclined for that.
Just on point. Thank you for that. That was exactly what I was thinking. If we, maybe even a shorter budget and finance meeting, and then and we did punt things from last time, and I was apologize, that was my conflict there. And if everybody could be prepared, and we'll talk with the administration about this and try to coordinate it, that rather than a 6 to 7:30 meeting, if we consider that your time might be encumbered from 6 to say 8. So we can have enough time to double down on these things. If that meet your time frame, Mr. Bennett and Ms. Pratt, next Thursday? Okay, that'd be great. Well, thank you all. That makes it simpler rather than a separate date. And if we have to schedule additional special meetings, I know everyone's committed to doing it.
Okay.
Let's move on.
So back to where we were about a half hour ago. It's been moved in second to table this topic. Are we moving in? All those in favor of tabling it for now, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Philippa, okay. Passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on. And now we are on to, you guys move things around a lot. Are we on to our presentations finally?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. Thank you. You three have our amazing people. You waited all this time. So I think we have the Regional Crisis Response Agency. Brooke, welcome. As you know, this will probably be a real slow, boring presentation, so everybody relax.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I have some slides, so
Okay.
hopefully those can pop up. But while they're coming, I'll introduce myself. I'm Brooke Bittner. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the inaugural Executive Director of Regional Crisis Response Agency, AKA your radar program manager, and excited to be here. This is my first time in person at Lake Forest Park City Council for this body of work, although I have been here before with my kids putting sticky notes on a map. And in my previous presentations, it's been online, so I'm just delighted to see everybody in person. So thank you, Mayor, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk about what we're doing at Regional Crisis Response and kind of how it is flowing from the work of Radar and the work that our 5 cities have been doing. I heard it was the down button. Oh, there we go. So Regional Crisis Response is something you've heard a lot about over the course of the last year, as you and the other 4 city councils signed the interlocal agreement that started the Regional Crisis Response entity as of January 1 of this year. It follows from the work of the Radar Navigator program, and we are continuing to provide in crisis de-escalation to support to in-progress police calls for folks with behavioral health crisis issues, as well as follow-up and referral to the community of care. We're working closely with the Lake Forest Park Police Department, as we have been, along with the police departments in Shoreline, Kenmore, Bothell, and Kirkland, our other partner cities. I'll get it. All right, here we go. So I want to talk just a little bit about what has happened in Lake Forest Park up until now and during the first quarter of Regional Crisis Response, or RACER operations. So Lake Forest Park started with the Radar Navigator program about 5 years ago. I think it's really important to emphasize that our 5 cities were doing alternative response before it was cool. So we had a big leg up. Our police departments were really among the first in the nation to start engaging in this work. And so we continue to get calls and requests for information about how we're doing this work because we've been engaged in it for quite a bit longer than other communities. We have an excellent partnership with Lake Forest Park Police Department. I do want to thank Chief Hardin. He and his command staff have been absolutely just a breeze to work with, a dream to work with. They were among our early adapters in the Radar community and quickly and easily took to the idea of calling in a mental health professional when that's appropriate. So during 2022 in Lake Forest Park, the Radar Navigators served 22 individuals. During the first quarter of 2023, they've served 7 individuals. And oftentimes those are folks that are receiving multiple touches or multiple contacts with a crisis responder navigator. We have done both in progress and follow-up with folks in Lake Forest Park. I'm going to speak a little bit to the way operations look right now because we've gradually expanded our scope and our coverage over the course of the last 3 years or so. When I initially came on in early 2020, we had space for 4 part-time contracted navigators. 2 of them were staffed, and I was responding directly in the field. We grew that to, at the end of last year, funding for 3 full-time employees. And now with Regional Crisis Response, we're at 10, funding for 10 full-time employee navigators. We're staffed right now at 6. We cover 5 to 6 days a week, 2 shifts essentially, not the overnight shift right now, but the hours of the day where we see the most calls. And the navigators are available for, like I said, in-progress calls, as well as to do follow-ups for individuals that have encountered police or that we've seen in the past and we know need just a little more help to get out of that crisis. We have 1 FTE that's primarily stationed in Bothell that travels to Lake Forest Park because they're on the same air. She's able to hear Lake Forest Park calls as they come in. And then the Lake Forest Park Police will also call when there's not someone stationed at Bothell, will call navigators stationed at other cities. So for example, Kirkland has a lot more staffing coverage than Bothell does. And so they'll call folks over from Kirkland when that's needed. I'm going to speak a little bit to the governance structure of the RACER entity. This is something that was approved in the interlocal agreement, but just kind of a refresher. The governance structure is generally made up of 3 tables. And then I'm going to speak also about the community advisory group that is mentioned in the interlocal agreement, not officially part of the governance structure, but I think a super important component of what we're doing. And then on the slide, you'll see a picture of the organizational structure that just shows you how many responders we will have out in the field when we're fully staffed. The dark blue boxes are responders, that positions that we have staffed now. One of those is a military deployment right now, so she's not in the field, but she will be back in the field in the next few months. So the governance structure for the Regional Crisis Response Agency consists of a principals assembly. And I know that your city manager has already brought this to you toward the beginning of the year to assign a delegate to the principals assembly. Thank you, council member. That will begin meeting in June. And the principals assembly will meet 3 times during the first year, most likely 3 times during the second year, and then no less than 1 time per year after that. In accordance with the interlocal agreement. And the idea of that is that it's the connection between the electeds and the work that's happening by city staff and by the navigators. The executive board is made up of the 5 city managers, 4 city managers and a deputy city manager from Kenmore. And that is really it serves as kind of the board of directors for operations for RACER. The operations board is something that we're just in the process of forming. And this one is exciting to me because it's going to create a unique opportunity for North King County to have kind of a system level view of coordinating the crisis, the entire crisis continuum of care. So sitting at the operations board will be the chiefs of police or their designees ultimately, the fire chiefs, the dispatch agencies that cover Lake Forest Park, Bothell, and Kirkland, and then the clinical directors from Connections Health, which is the operator of our crisis clinic that's coming to town, from Evergreen Emergency Department, from 988. So Crisis Connections is the provider for 988. And then from Center for Human Services, which is one of our primary behavioral health providers in this community, and also the provider that we partner with through a Department of Justice grant to have kind of no wrong door entry into the outpatient system. So the crisis clinic will be that no wrong door to a residential placement, and then we'll have capacity within Center for Human Services to take people directly to an intake appointment for outpatient services. And then finally, I want to talk briefly about the community advisory group. And this is something that I'm really proud of personally, because I have, as far as I know, this is kind of a first of its kind in the nation, where we have a table of folks with lived experience in the crisis system that are actively experiencing behavioral health symptoms and behavioral health crisis, even that are living homeless or have experienced homelessness, telling us how to do our jobs better. I asked them to weigh in on everything from who we hire to recently we got funding for engagement items. So things that we can provide to people in crisis. What should we buy? What should we have on hand? What would be most useful to you when you're in a moment of crisis? So really making sure that our full program is responsive to the needs of people that will be receiving our services. And I have to say, I've been really pleased by the response of the city managers and the police chiefs saying, this is great to hear from the people that will get these services. And they've been just incredibly responsive to that direction and guidance. And I very much appreciate that. So a little preview of coming attractions for RACER. On a future consent agenda, you will see a dissolution of the radar interlocal agreement that was signed by the 5 cities several years ago. And we're keeping it on board until the city of Bothell is done with their radar mid-funding and transitions all the employees over to the city of Kirkland as the new fiscal agent, and just making sure all those loose ends are tied up before we do the dissolution. But you will see that come before you in the next few months. The next few months will also be the time as we convene the principals assembly and the operations board. And then we're going to engage in something that I'm calling a community visioning process. So I'm going to come back to you more on an informal basis and invite you to participate in a couple of sessions with community members, stakeholders in agencies, folks with lived experience, council, everybody that has an interest in what we want our community to look like in terms of behavioral health, and really do that kind of forward thinking about what's our goal, what's our vision, and let that inform the decisions that we make as we build this program, including things like our data collection strategy. So how do we measure where we want to go? First, we want to define where it is that we want to be as a community. And part of that will look like being a crisis now community. And that's something you've probably heard a lot as we see 988 rolling out and the crisis facility coming online, that a true responsive crisis now community has someone to call, that's 988, someone to respond, that's the RACER team, and somewhere to go. And that's the No Wrong Door crisis facility that's coming online in 2024. So we are really going to be one of the first communities in the region to have this full continuum of crisis care. And as the RACER cities and with the operations board, we have the opportunity to kind of be at the helm of what that looks like for our community. It's very exciting. So just a couple of pictures of what the crisis triage facility could look like. Obviously, it's not built yet, but these are examples in other communities. This is the last piece of the puzzle coming soon from our Connections Health partners. A lot of you were there at the press event with Governor Inslee, where we had that just kind of exciting moment of saying, hey, we're on our way. And that will complete the continuum of care. And moving into 2024, 2025, our community is going to look a lot different. And I'm really delighted that we are all going to be a part of that. So that's all I have for you tonight. I would love to hear questions or thoughts or direction or anything.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brooke, thank you so much for all that you and all the participants in this program and that have led up to this important time. I actually had the experience a couple of weeks ago of having to call dispatch about an individual that was in trouble at 11 o'clock in the morning, right here in the middle of Bothell Way. And I said, I think this is an appropriate thing for an intervention by radar. And the dispatcher was absolutely, I mean, I could hear them in the background doing something while we were talking. And I thought they knew immediately the importance of the program and how it could help this individual. It was not something that the PD needed to do other than to make sure this individual was safe. And it was quite extraordinary. So I would thank you for all that you and the PD and all the responders do in this regard. And it really, truly is a model for the nation. I think that the outpouring of support at that event that you showed the picture of was quite extraordinary, from the governor's office down to the county executive, et cetera. Everyone is really pulling for the team. And it's, again, thank you.
Thanks for sharing that story. I love to hear it in action.
Yes, Councilmember Fatai.
Thank you, Ms. Buettner, for the great presentation and the work that you do. The community appreciates it. I did have one question, which is, you were mentioning, we've been mentioning this is the model for the nation. Well, I've actually been getting some inquiries from cities in California about this. Do you and your staff have the capability to talk to some of these other cities about the model?
Absolutely. I've been doing that for several years. Right now is a little tough, but I'm telling people, can we talk in July? Because we're in just the process of transitioning everything from Bothell to Kirkland, all of the funding sources and all that. So we're tight right now, but we are absolutely happy to talk to other people. So please send them my way.
I will. Thank you.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yep, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to working with you through the Principals Assembly. I have a question. So last Friday, I attended the Seashore Transportation Forum, and we had a presentation from King County Metro, and they talked about how they have a pilot that I think they launched last month at the Aurora Village Transit Center, where they will have support teams to assist people. And that sounds a lot like what Racer is also doing. So I was just curious how your teams will be working together on that.
Yeah, that particular location is really interesting because the city of Shoreline is a King County Sheriff's Office contract city. And they are also a racer city, and they actually have a full-time navigator station there at City of Shoreline. And anecdotally, I am hearing that 70 to 80% of their navigator calls are from the transit center. So related to that transit. But by the contract, the law enforcement contract, the law enforcement for transit is covered by King County Sheriff's Office Transit Unit. So there's a lot of overlap. Certainly what they're doing, we're going to partner with them. I think they're doing a slightly lower acuity response than we generally do, because one of the hallmarks of the Racer program is that we will go out to someone that is not in behavioral control, someone that is at the highest acuity of behavioral health crisis. A lot of these other teams, there's a lot of work that they can do from the moment after crisis until the person reaches a moment of stability, but they don't have the skill to really intervene in that moment of true crisis. And so we work really closely with those teams, and we do kind of different things.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, Councilmember Cass, over.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you so much, Brooke. We are enormously proud of everything that you have done with the radar program, and just really excited about what's happening now with Racer and the new crisis center that will come online in another 9 months, we hope. I think the only real question I have at this point is about staffing. I know that it's been extremely difficult for many of our human service agencies in the region to find the staff and keep them stable in their roles. And I'm just wondering how that's going for your team, and just so that we have some sort of sense of what we might face in the future when it comes to staffing.
Yeah, I love that question. And for the racer team, we do not experience the kind of scarcity that other programs do for a couple of reasons. One is that we have a very competitive wage and benefit package because they're municipal employees. This is one of the best jobs out there for social workers. And so we can kind of pick and choose folks that have that very high level of experience that's not that common because this is a new field. And so my approach is not that I'm just trying to fill every position. I'm looking for people that are really right, that are really going to be that high skill level and are going to stay with us for a long time. And we've had good luck, and I anticipate that we'll continue to do well. I feel for other agencies that don't have councils that are supportive, that allow them to pay a very competitive wage and that allow them to do it internal to their cities, because offering that municipal benefits package is a huge draw. So moving from contractors to full-time equivalent employees has made a big difference in recruiting.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna say two things. I don't know how the stars lined up and have you land in our lap to be running this program, but thank you. You're fantastic. I've been hearing about you a long time before I met you. I have a city administrator that has used your name a few times for a while, so I guarantee that. And number two, you know how refreshing it is to sit up here after 12 years and actually hear that something's actually getting done and the money's getting spent and we're actually accomplishing something. And thank you for that. Because it's really fantastic that we're actually seeing progress and as quick as it is. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Phil. But it is really, we need wins like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry you had to wait so long to do that. But
It's exciting to see democracy in action. And did I already say I live in Lake Forest Park? So this is my home, my community.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Democracy in action. Thank you. And with that, we're going to move on. Have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And now we're going to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board Work Plan, which I'm really excited because I think you guys have a lot going to be going on.
We got a lot going on. Yeah, and a lot in the future. Good evening. I'm Tyler Dittman, the chair of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. Happy to provide you a little overview of what we've been working on and kind of a walkthrough of our work plan for the year. As you know, we're composed of 5 people right now, including the student from tonight. So thank you very much. That
I
helps
got
a lot.
another one today.
What was that?
I interviewed another person today.
Excellent. Yes, so we have one opening, so that's great. And we're supported by Councilmember Bodie and Corey Roche from the city, who's also fantastic. I believe you have our work plan in your materials tonight, so I'll just do a quick walkthrough. So this year, we're focusing on 5 areas. The first one with, of course, we like parks. So the board is very excited to work on the upcoming Lakefront Park property. As you engage with a consultant in the next few months, we're eager to help with that, to help work on the planning, to help coordinate that with the public, with the community, and gather their input. We'd love to think of some ideas for how to get for outreach to the community to bring the citizens into the project and working with you on all that. The second work plan item is really more about providing relevant and up-to-date information to people about our parks. We'd like to try something of a park spotlight, either on our social media presence or on the e-news that probably folks on the board would write and kind of promote our parks. We love our parks and we're passionate about it, so we look forward to sharing that with folks. The third one is also pretty exciting, at least I think. It's all about expanding our recreation opportunities. If you remember last summer, we did a yoga in the parks series. I believe it was 6 or 8. Now I can't remember. That was super successful. I thought that was really fun. I went to one just to staff it. I didn't actually do it, but that's I encourage you to check it out. Really good turnout, a wide range of community, and really well received. So we're going to expand that again and do it again this summer. We're also still looking at, and I think I mentioned this earlier, at setting up some walking routes through the city. Sidewalks are a problem in that regard, you might be aware. So that's one thing we're looking at, hoping to organize an event that gets people through the city, maybe connecting with some of the parks. And of course, last year, one of our big wins was about pickleball.
Yes,
Everybody loves
I was waiting
pickleball,
for
right?
that.
So we updated the court up at Horizon View, expanded it to have multiple pickleball courts on the one tennis court, while keeping in mind the parking situation, which is not generous. So trying not to overwhelm the park. That's been great. And so we're looking at expanding access to pickleball, maybe some recreation opportunities around that. The fourth item on the work plan you have there is looking for ways to just expand how we tell people about these recreation opportunities, and to, let's see. Oh, to go to community events, to tell people about the parks, to probably connect with the first work plan item about soliciting input, gathering ideas, telling people, keeping people involved in the process for the lakefront park property. So we have a lot of good summer events coming up and a lot of opportunity there. And the last one is to just think about how parks intersect with a lot of our other boards and commissions, tree board, climate action, even the libraries. We'd be happy to work with the libraries advisory board to bring parks into that picture. That was a very quick overview, but it's late. If you have any questions, happy to talk more, or let me know if you want to play pickleball.
I interviewed her. I should have known that was going to be, she was big into pickleball.
Oh, she's big into pickleball.
Yes, she was. Do I have any questions? Wow, you guys are quiet. I'll say a couple of things. Would like, oh, go ahead, Tracy. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your work on the Parks Commission. Mr. Dittman, sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies. I should know that. But one question that I did have is, as you mentioned, you wanted to reach out to other boards and commissions, and certainly the Climate Action Commission would love to work with you on the walking tour thing.
Yeah.
So do you see value in joint meetings with or having representatives to these different boards?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. We have had special guest kind of presenters at each other's meetings in the past. I don't think we've done a meeting really jointly on the same topic, but I could see that absolutely working out with the right topic, right? Like if there's clearly an overlap in what we do, I'd be happy to do that. That sounds fantastic.
Right. And it's no secret that I'm probably talking about that lakefront property. So yeah, because
Yeah.
it touches on so much of our lives.
There's a lot to talk about on that.
That's for sure. Yes, Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, thanks. And also on the subject of synergy, I'm the liaison to the tree board.
Great.
And the tree board has a number of tree walks. And so I could see there being like sort of a joint like park/tree
Yeah.
walk.
Absolutely. There are a lot of great trees in our parks. That's why they're such great parks. And a lot of the walking routes that are already established actually within the city, on the city's website, are all about trees, right? They take you through the city and identify the amazing trees that we have. So we absolutely promote those as well. We're hoping to find the connection to the parks in that too.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
So actually, I've been thinking about that, realistically, you guys, the tree board, the park board and the environmental committee are all basically one big group that I really think it'd be great for you all to get together. And just because, and I'm trying very hard to get you filled, and as I know if you've heard, I'm trying to get a bullpen, so there's always somebody there waiting
great.
to go in. So I'm really ecstatic about your guys' group because we got a lot going on. I'm really excited about the across the street and what that's going to bring to the city. And I really appreciate everything you do. I do apologize to you too. I'll send you a gift certificate to Dick's Drive-In for sitting here this long. So have Phil order some Dick's Drive-Ins next week. But we really appreciate, because you guys put a lot of work, and hopefully one thing I would like to ask, I'd really like to start seeing people get together and meet in person more.
Yeah.
I think that would help all of our, when we start all this COVID hit and really slowed us down, but now especially you guys could meet outside maybe once in a while. The person I interviewed today and the kid, the gentleman, they would, I think giving tours to the parks would be great to your new members, just so they know what they're up against. But you guys do a great job and I appreciate everything you're doing. So
Great.
thank
Thanks
you
a lot.
very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Have a great night.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay.
Round of citizen comments.
Yeah, I think we're on to citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens' comments?
Setting a record. Ours.
Corey, you can't comment. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they evolved. Oh. Is Deborah Alderman here? I do not see Deborah. How about Adam Ware? Adam Ware. Okay, is there anybody online?
If you want to address the council, please use the raise hand function.
Mr. Mike's there.
Okay, not seeing any. We'll close citizens' comments and move on to consent calendar. Would that be next?
So moved.
Second.
Consent calendar to move second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any, well, wait a minute. We were moving.
We moved
We moved it already.
D off.
Okay, we
Yeah.
moved D off. Okay,
Mhm.
great. So with that, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, anybody nays? Seeing none, thank you very much. And we'll move on to
D.
ordinances and resolutions, council discussion. D is moved down to there, so resolution 23-1896, authorizing the mayor to sign amendment number 1 to the Washington State Department of Ecology 2020-23 Biennial Stormwater Capacity Grant.
I think I'll move that so we can have a discussion. So I'll move resolution 23-1896, authorizing the mayor to sign amendment number 1 to the Washington State Department of Ecology 21-23 Biennial Stormwater Capacity Grant, not in one breath.
Second.
Okay, it's moving second. Is there any discussion? Well, yes.
Why, yes, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I wanted to bring this to discussion because it does tie in with the next top item on our agenda. But this is a recognition that we are getting an extension in both dollars and time to do some of our NPDES work. So what was originally a $50,000 grant has been extended to a $75,000 grant. So we got an additional $25,000 and a little bit more time to use this money. And so that's money that we will be using towards, like I said, the next item on our agenda. And I just wanted to daylight the work that the staff does to make sure that we are getting additional funding, grant funding where we can to make our work easier and free up money for other things sometimes.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Call the question.
What point of order?
yes.
Do we have to waive the 3-touch rule on this one?
It was
This
on
is-
consent, so no.
Oh, okay, what's on, okay, gotcha.
Okay, so it's moving second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, pass unanimously. And then on to ordinance and resolution 23-1894, authorize the mayor to sign professional service agreement with Aspect Consulting LLC for NPDES Municipal Stormwater Program Support. Yes, sir. How are you tonight? I'm just excited. I got to say NPDES.
Well, hello, everybody. This is the second touch for the contract that we
Turn
have
your
with
mic. There you
Aspect.
got it. Okay.
This is the second touch that we have with Aspect. They're the ones that are going to be helping with our IDDA inspections as well as project management, and other NPDES related services to help out with staff as well as our staff shortage that we have right now. So I'll be asking for your blessing to forego the 3-touch rule and approve the contract this evening if you do feel as though that's appropriate.
Yes.
If there's no questions, I would like to move to remove the 3-touch rule for resolution 23-1894. Authorizing the mayor to sign professional services agreement with Aspect Consulting LLC and NPDES Municipal Stormwater Program Support. Due to the timing of when we want this contract to start, it felt like we should address it this evening and rather than waiting for 2 weeks from now.
Second.
It's been moved in second to remove the 3-touch rule on resolution 23-1894. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Would anybody like to move resolution?
I will move resolution 23-1894, authorizing the mayor to sign the professional services agreement with Aspect Consulting LLC for NPDES Municipal Stormwater Program Support.
I'll second that as well.
Okay. Do I see any other discussion? Yes, Councilmember Fairtime.
I am not going to vote against this because this is very important work to the city, but it still does bug me that the expenses sheet that's attachment two still doesn't have the $5,400 correction on it for the testing itself. It's not a big deal, but it was that attention to detail that I was kind of looking for.
Duly noted.
So it's been moved in second and discussed. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? It's like pass unanimously. Thank you very much, council. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, we're gonna move on to council discussion and action. Philippa, you need to go to bed. I love you, but you're looking pretty tired sitting there, okay?
It's midnight.
Midnight back there, isn't it?
It is. And I'm staying in a house with cats, which I'm rather allergic to, so I'm feeling kind of fuzzy. So yeah, probably should go.
Thank you for joining us and I hope you're having a good trip and happy belated birthday.
Yeah, happy belated
Oh,
birthday.
thank
Who
you
wants
very
to
much.
sing you happy birthday? Would that be kind of fun?
No.
Phil's gonna,
Thank you.
Phil and the chief are gonna do a duet.
I'll see you
He
guys
doesn't
next
want
week.
it. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Yay. Okay. We'll let you.
Okay, good night.
Thank you, Philippa.
Take care.
Good night. Okay, any other business, council committee reports? Seeing none, I guess that, mayor's report, I'm just gonna report one thing, is I had to do I had some appointments last week and I was a lot of places and, it's really awesome that we all get the chance to live in Lake Forest Park. We are a very lucky city because some places aren't quite like we are, so thank you, council, for all the work you do to make it this way. And Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, I was a little confused about the distinction between council committee and council member reports, but I do have a quick council member report.
We've been confused about that for years, so go ahead.
When we get to that section in the governance manual. I'll just mention the tree board, since it is getting a bit late. The tree board met last week. They spent most of the meeting going over the proposed right-of-way ordinance. Planning Director Bennett was there as well. They spent a lot of time discussing. They weren't able to reach decisions, but the plan is for them to bring it up at their June meeting. And then at that time, hopefully by the end of the June meeting, to take a vote on their recommendations and send that back to the council. So that's the tree board's plan. But yeah, they considered a bunch of things. They considered how wide the corridor should be, what the priorities should be. But they are taking a very deep look at it.
And I'm excited for your new member. Yeah, that was great. Thank Mark again for stepping up.
That's awesome.
Anybody else? Anything for the good of the order?
Phil?
Yes, how about your city administrator report?
Nothing to add. I just hope you appreciate that it's not just the police department report this week. So
Yeah, well,
we're doing better. But if you have any questions for me, happy to answer them, but nothing else to add.
that. Seeing no other business at this time. Thank you, council. We got a lot done. Thank you and have a great night. And we're out of here. Go home and be with your families.
Allergies are killing me.